Hello, and welcome to my final project for American Literature class, a response to the Silence Dogood letters from the perspective of Emily Dickinson. Going forward, I will be reading from a script. I fancy myself more of a writer and poet than a video curator. With this said, I tried to make an engaging enough slideshow, but the majority of my time spent on this final was spent reading both books mentioned, as well as the Dogood letters. That alongside my time spent writing, I have undoubtedly put forth north of 15 hours in this project, if not more. So, my actual video may be lackluster, but I hope my creativity and dedication can at least permit me a high B or hopefully even A. I understand if some points must be deducted, however, as you are wanting a more video-centric piece. Benjamin Franklin is the writer of the Silence Dogood letters. These letters were a serious critique of societal norms from the perspective of an informed, well-educated woman, something that was uncommon for the time of 1722. In this final project, I will be reading a letter I wrote from the perspective of Emily Dickinson, in response to the first 10 Silence Dogood letters. I used the Silence Dogood letters, the letters of Emily Dickinson edited by Christine Miller and Domhnall Mitchell, and the poems of Emily Dickinson edited by R.W. Franklin to inform my stance and perspective. Unlike what is commonly spoken of Emily Dickinson, she was not in fact a recluse. She had a wide community in which she consistently engaged with. From literary colleagues to friends and family, she had a plentiful and large community. In fact, her household, especially early on in life, constantly had friends or family moving into or out of her home. In Emily's letters, she consistently references the comings and goings of cars and, quote, strangers. Emily was known as a poet and a genuine friend with lots of emotion. She was very affectionate in her letters and poems. She often focused on her connection with God, the night, and nature. She could also maintain firm opinions and stances on a variety of topics in the news. With her respondents, she expected them to be reading news regularly and consistently. She sought to be known as someone who was not, quote, common. She was a very strong and resilient character, which is shown by her forthright nature regarding her feelings in her letters. She is lit with vivid imagery and riddled with affection. She is a very sincere person, and with my preface being complete, I will now begin reading the letter I've formulated. Dear Miss Dogood, upon reading your expertly sophisticated prose in the New England Courant, as a fellow woman that shan't desire to be seen as common, thought to write you a few lines to further our strife for betterment of our gender and its standards. Beforehand, however, just as the bee appreciates the flower, I do too appreciate your adamantly firm stance with your character and past. I grieve for your loss of lover, and I pray to God that he may find peace in the afterlife, and you peace in this one. To see where you now do stand in stature, I find myself in awe, similar to that of which the stars emit in the sky above. I firmly agree with your methodological structure, in which you signify the ability to persuade others. We must, as a writer, be able to convey our opinions in such a wide variety of topics as to include politics, love, religion, and inner thoughts or opinions. With this, we can surely convey a conversation with the most wide assortment of people, as previously thought ineffable. To carry on to our perceptions of school and education, shall we not encourage those who, in a lack of ability to educate themselves, seek our finer educationary edifices that our blooming society has to offer? While I concur that some may find this idea a nuisance, I find myself in the pupating stance of willingness to encourage education by any means. If at the very least, we must realize that those of us who lack the insight to read might need to be sent to these places to learn that which the pillars of knowledge and education are substantially built upon. If it is our joint desire to increase humanity's awareness of itself, and seek to overcome our human nature of strife and fighting, then we must encourage these, quote, dunces and blockheads. For how else can these same people overcome that nature, without the assistance of education, when they lack the self-propelling skills to further their own persons and identities within their own accord? We must encourage our positive influences on society, not shun those who seek to find them. I do agree with you, however, that our idleness and ignorance do in fact limit our potential. It is a sorry state of affairs in our case, that too many of us find ourselves unable to see the way out of their affairs and grasp, that being the aforementioned idleness and ignorance. I, contrary to you, am emboldened by optimistic sight. I don't seek to find the litigiousness that lingers in the depths of our society. While plagiarism might be a sad, minute outcome of our temple of theology, this might in fact be a necessary evil we must accept in hopes to further our society in a positive manner. If anything, we should strain the importance of religious hope and ideology on our youth. With these morals and standards, we should be able to overcome this happenstance. Yet, as the nature of our world permits, some will inevitably listen to the devils in their ears and give in to this vile temptation. As the dusk settles on the horizon outside my window, I find myself reaching for my candle, as no night could wish to suppress my desire to further our engagement in your wondrous discourse with society. As the nightshade on January blooms, so too does my love to see a fellow woman stay strong in the face of men who wish to suppress. I find myself appalled at the audacious and impetuous nature that which this Ephraim censorious retorts with. Here is clearly a man who lacks love in his life, to automatically resort to the attack, such as one would expect of a child. The lack of insight regarding his own vice and vexation is humorous, and it seems not only you, but I myself also have my work cut out for me. I couldn't agree with you more on the topic of Ephraim's perceived vice that women exude. A good woman's work is never truly done. Even if we remain single or as a widow, we are still the supports that which our society is founded upon. If Ephraim's is in fact dictating that our female vice is idleness, then he is surely to be at blame for indulging this allowance and permittance, as well as all men who claim to share his stance. We are dictated to a point that if men should find trouble within ourselves, their better, more peaceful half, then they in fact have trouble with themselves truly and wholly. I am soothed to hear another speak out about our suppression of female educational rights. Ephraim is a cold and bitter man to maintain his anger with women while not seeking to allow us the same educational standards. My impression of him is similar to that of the hare's impression of the wolf, a vile creature that seeks to maintain a state of harm and suppression around those who surround him, one who also lacks the willingness to improve themselves and instead directs any poor behavior or actions that belongs to himself as a projection of hate upon others alongside his perceived literary efficacy. While it is true we women do have our vice and faults, there is indeed no vice or fault in which men don't share an equal amount of precedence or participation in. It is foolhardy to believe that women are the cause of the vice of men, and that men are not, and should not be held culpable and responsible. While I agree with your points until this 6th letter, I must counter that we should encourage and support a certain amount of pride within ourselves and our opposite gender. While pride indeed can lead to infatuation of oneself and a domineering sense of superiority, if we can maintain a healthy boundary between pride and arrogance, then pride is surely something to be respected and perhaps desired. As to have a lack of pride in oneself and one's worth would lead to emotional turmoil and a spiral in which the person becomes lesser than what opportunity and fate may allow. With this said, however, the extravagant self-appointed pride in those that need the support are in fact rifled with troublesome questions regarding their moral and ethical codes. Pride of apparel is in fact a folly, as you address. One should be foremost and firstmost in a state of desire to make oneself appealing through the expansion of their own personal prowess and mind, not of our physical possessions, as that directly encourages our greed and insatiable appetite for the desire of seeking more. We must all find comfort in our station, and act thus accordingly. I find myself humored by your remarks of the hoop petticoats. They are indeed much like how you describe. What an abhorrent, overinflated sense of vanity we must hold, for us women to feel gravitated to their egocentric design. I will follow in your footsteps, and remove a few loops from mine on the morrow. To purgatory I will send my old garb, never to see the light of day again, for if it to be witnessed on my body, would be considered vain, and perhaps in my eyes sinful to some degree. I find myself flattered and overjoyed to hear your opinions on poetry, much greater than you could begin to know. There is a severe lack of appreciation and understanding of the beauty that poetry is able to exude from line to line. Even less of an understanding is its capability for complexity and personal intuitive change. What a beautiful elixir this is, as words seep from the mouth. A peasant pleased, from one so attentive, such is thee. No migratory plea, just an aroma that fills me with such glee. Dusk and divinity shimmer alongside me, perhaps even the royal we. The poetry you share are indeed superbly beautiful and astounding in its capacity for emotional connection and investment. I love your analysis of the poem on the wife, daughter, and sister. I agree completely with your perspective. It is wondrous in its smart layout of word choice and framing. What an excellent letter to include with wonderful insight on potential ways of formulating elegy and poetical lines. I myself might go off of more inspiration and feelings, but for a serious manner of poetry, this is excellent advice indeed. I am proud to be a woman alongside one such as yourself, Miss Dogood. I undoubtedly love the abstract from the London Journal that you include. Freedom of speech and the ability to call one's tongue thy own is indeed a thing of divinity, for nothing else can allow a man, or in my case woman, feel so free in their given life therein. If a government did indeed wish to suppress its population, freedom of speech would surely be a prime place to start. Indeed, as this piece states, quote, only the wicked governors of men dread what is said of them. You are surely superfluous and intelligent to come to recognize even godly men in a position of government are faced with constant temptation to, quote, propagate public destruction of personal advantages and security. The false claims of our politicians and political figures to be called Christian, and yet continue with their vile means of self-perpetuance and greedy indulgences, is abhorrent. To maintain a false sense of piousness should be considered unholy and truly tainted. I feel such sadness regarding the sorrowful state of our sister widows. It is indeed a rarity in which someone can't say they have housed a cousin, sister, or in-law for the winter, or perhaps spring. Luckily, in my curated community, we can all say we have housed others. It is an interesting thought to have such a widow's insurance and means of support for those indebtedly inclined. But I can't imagine a sunrise in which this peach may come to fruition. Perhaps all will be sorted out in due time, although perhaps not ours or our children's. One can still maintain hope, however, in these trying times we find ourselves in. Nothing is more palpable than hope, bliss, and inner harmony. While I would love to write further, continuing the dialect I left off after your 10th letter, I find myself in a blue state, one of which my candle flickers and the remaining wax grows thin. My parchment is all but used up, to which no one is more sorrowful than I am. The night grows ever darker outside my window, and I am forced to submit to the night, although this is where I find the most peace and tranquility in life, when I have the quiet of the night surround me, and no one but my own thoughts and God may intervene. With sweet respect, Affy, Emily E. Dickinson.